I got something that I could bring, that I could take away. That's what I usually say to myself wherever I go. Because even if you don't have that at the moment, if there is a seed that's within you, in your heart, like in your future practice, and always there's that challenge in life. Like you say, oh, easy for her to say she's a professor in New York. The truth of the matter is I was born in a poor family. My own father told me, since you will be pursuing a career of diapers, which in some culture, women are put in that category. You are the one that's gonna be having children. So my father was saying, you don't need education more than the sixth grade. My father loved me. I love my father, but he didn't know. It was a struggle for me to get to where I am. I share that with you to just show that if there is a will, there is certainly a way. Okay. So the last slide, and the faculty has a copy of the slides. If they want a copy, we are more than happy to share you the copies. Obviously, I will not going to be able to go through each and every slide because there are so much more. But maybe in the future you could use it. Next slide, please. Thank you for giving us classes. It's okay to drink from a bottle. It's easier to. Okay. Just a brief. Can I walk with these? Yeah, we just do.
Was it something I said?
Not at all. This way I could move about a little bit and I could still look at you and, make sure that your mind had gotten ahead of you and thinking, oh, what's going to be for lunch? When is she going to stop? That like our brain is always ahead of us. Okay, so it is a formal humanistic studies, like both the introductions from Professor Lupena and Dr. Dimakulangan are. Why is transcultural nursing important? People are migrating all over the world. How many of you are not from the Philippines, from another country, studying here? Okay. During our time, we did not have Chinese students. So welcome also. So you're proof that, there's like global traveling and migration. And as I mentioned before, Filipino nurses go abroad and take care of patients that are multicultural. So it's very important. The next one is rise in multicultural identity. Before, there was this, that saying that we're like a stew. When you think of a stew, when we cook, like say chicken stew, you put potatoes in it, carrots, or other vegetables of your choice. When you overcook this stew, what happens to the individual ingredients? They are not so recognizable. So the current trend now is for people to have their cultural identities. So in other words, when they migrate to another nation, instead of forgetting their language, they will make sure that the children are learning the language and the life ways. Because with culture, remember, it is both the tangible, the manner of dressing, the language, and the intangibles, the cultural values, the mores, all these things that that we don't see. Like for example, in as a cultural to illustrate the point, like in New York, if you were to breastfeed, you were like gonna have like a big shield, and you're not just gonna take out your breast to nourish your infant in public. Whereas in here, sometimes you see people like nursing their babies in public. Okay, so the other notion instead of the stew is the salad. So we all know we make salad, and do you still recognize the individual component? Like you could recognize your lettuce, your carrots, your jicama, in it. So in other words, your culture is still apparent. You're prouder of your culture. You're more willing to transmit it from one generation to another. Whereas even my husband attests to this. When people used to migrate to the United States, like say from Europe, like from Ireland and from all these parts in Europe. The tendency at the time, and they used to come to Ellis Island to be processed. That's closed now. It's a tourist attraction. Some people will change their name, like like a Jewish name, for example, like Simeon. It becomes Simmons. This is Simmons, so it's more anglicized. So you would be like the rest, like the transition. But now they use their names. Cultural conflict and clashes. A big example is like the country of Yugoslavia. Anyone familiar with the country of Yugoslavia? What happened? If you're following history, what countries comprise the former Yugoslavia? You got Serbia, you got Herzegovina, and all these other countries. Because of different religions, different ways of life, but that's just an illustration. And people are more, the last one on that slide, people know more their rights in terms of care. Do you have a Bill of Rights here for patients? We have one in the United States also. And those are usually posted when you're being admitted at the hospital, like in very prominent places. Okay, when we're looking at this is one of my favorite slides, and I use it in a lot of my presentation. It's about nurses. Globally, 50% of global health workforce is made of nurses. And what is 2020? the year of the nurse and the midwife. It's a big celebration in all over the globe. I mean, every day, to me, every day really should be Nurses Day. But in the United States, it was usually a day before designated as Nurses Day. They have since moved to a week celebration of nursing. But 2020 is like a year for all of us. In caregiving also, most probably you'll be pursuing nursing, in the future as well. You're like in the gateway already. Okay, so globally, almost 21 million nurses. Is there a shortage of nurses globally, right? In the United States alone, we need about 1 million of nurses in a few years. That's just the United States. And we all know that in some countries, like westernized countries or developed countries, there are a lot more nurses. In the Philippines and other developing countries, there are less. And when you go to Africa or those underdeveloped countries, the ratio would really amaze you. It's a big challenge. I don't know the exact number of nurses in the Philippines. I was looking for statistics. Does anyone know? How many nurses do we have in the Philippines? Like, so if we don't know it right this minute, maybe you guys could email me next and say, oh, Dr. Sega, we found out, after all. In the United States, more than 3 million are nurses. And of course, we have many nurses, Filipino nurses in the United States. We have the Philippine Nurses Association of America, which is very strong. We have chapters in many, many states. There's a very active one in New York. And both the PNAA and the PNA New York had sponsored the Balituro at Silliman University. So that Balituro was I did 2 sessions. One is transcultural nursing. Another one is academic accreditation in the United States. My husband conducted one on traumatic brain injury. The president of the Philippine PNA of New York did a workshop on global health. Someone did it on intravenous infusion, and the other one is on HIV/AIDS. So you see from the many topics that, it was a well-planned presentation. And like I said, whenever I go home, I volunteer and I say, can I do a workshop for you? What would you need at the College of Nursing? In the United States, nurses are voted for 17 years in a row as the most trustworthy of professionals. The public voted them in surveys called the Gallup polls. They are also the highest in numbers, and nurses capitalize on that. They don't capitalize it enough to harness that power. The number and the public trust are very strong. Does anyone have a question so far? At Mount St. Mary College, I'm known to be, if nobody asks me questions in my class, guess who asked the question? I do. And I know their names by like the second meeting. Okay, some reasons for integrating transcultural nursing. The increasing globalization, like diverse patients in any given country. Plus, we have a body of knowledge in transcultural nursing. Um, Dr. Madeline Leininger spent like 50 years of her life developing transcultural nursing. That's a lot of years for someone to do. She founded the Transcultural Nursing Society as well as the Journal of Transcultural Nursing. In the United States, we have accreditation guidelines and mandates like the culturally and linguistically appropriate services. That was in 2000, published in 2001 in the United States. The Joint Commission is the accreditor of hospitals. They have diversity and transcultural nursing. In those two, the Commission on Collegiate Nursing Education and the Commission on Nursing Education Accreditation are two of the accrediting bodies for schools in the United States. Why is accreditation important in the United States? If you graduate from a school that's not accredited, you're not going to be able to work. So that's these are some of the challenges in curricular integration. How many units do you need to graduate? So 210 for you in terms of units. In the United States, it's credits, it's about 120. So in other words, if the curriculum already has 120 credits, if you were to do a 3 credit in transcultural nursing, what do you need to do? You need to remove a 3 credit course to be able to make way for that course. So as you can see, it is very hard. If you have you have 6 faculty at the school at the college of nursing. So for example, if you say, oh, okay, we're gonna remove 3 credits, you're gonna say, which one? Somebody would say, oh no, this one is very important. You cannot remove this. Imagine if you have 20 or 50 people at a school, how challenging that would be. The other one is lack of faculty preparation. Because in the United States, some nursing curriculum do not really have transcultural nursing. And some faculty have not had transcultural nursing classes. At Mount St. Mary College, like about 10 years ago, I developed a 3 credit graduate course in transcultural nursing. That was approved by the school and then by the Senate, it's like the college as a whole and the curriculum. So that became part of the Masters of Science in Nursing Education for nurse practitioner. And I used to teach that course. I also developed a 3 credit course for the undergraduate, for like the BS in nursing. That was never approved as part of the curriculum. Later it was approved as elective. So you could see how hard it is to actually include it. What do you think are the challenges unique to your own integration? Does anyone did
Perhaps ma'am, have a faculty was formal training for this course.
Dinala is saying the formal training. I can volunteer. I can volunteer to help. I'm not saying I'm going to develop it because when you develop these courses, you always have to make sure it's applicable to your own setting. Because we wouldn't say, you have to do this and this, but, it will have to be gradual. Okay, so that's one. Anything else? There are free courses that people could take online to prepare. And I know there's an anthropology course in the PS in nursing. Are there any other courses? There's no separate course, right? This is just a question. I'm not like doing a critique of your curriculum or what you need, but just thought if indeed we're preparing nurses, and right at this setting, you're very diverse also. One look, and we're all Asians, and sometimes we get lumped, like all Asians. So, we're the Filipinos, we're the Chinese, the Japanese, the Singaporean, and everything. We all have different cultures. And if you really think about it, even among the Filipinos, like the Bicolanos have different ones, the Visayans. But there are definitely tools. The American Association of Colleges of Nursing has a lot of tools, and I could send that, and possibly those things could be looked at in terms of your own CHED guidelines. And I have a question mark there about Philippine educational resources. I'm sure you have a lot. So I could go for started at 8. Okay, so maybe around 9:30, Mr. Cesar could do the LGBTQ. In the US, we have actual guidelines from the American Nurses Association, and the International Council of Nurses have their own guidelines. I'm sure there are older guidelines than the 2013 that I've seen. And just a reminder, if indeed diversity and the PCN would be integrated in the curriculum, it has to be both in the classroom as well as the clinical. Because in terms of pre and post conferences or their projects. Okay, there's that advocacy role of the nurse. That have you been introduced to your advocacy role as a nurse yet, or you haven't gotten there? These are like first year students, or all of them are. and secondly. Does anyone know how to be an advocate? Basically, if we are an advocate, we give voice to the voiceless. So like we say, the poor, the most vulnerable, we make sure that they get, equitable care. The Joint Commission that accredits hospitals in the United States have all these guidelines for culturally congruent care. They did a study of hospitals in Florida, and because they were looking at interpreters. You know, when you come into the hospital and you do not speak English or you have limited English proficiency, the left they call. So all these hospitals have language access services. What that means is, say if I come in and I don't speak English, I'm a Bicolano, and it is my right to have an interpreter who, in terms of the spoken language, and a translator in terms of written language, free of charge to me, but the hospital spends for it. So they all have language access services or LAS. And guess who they were using as interpreters when they come in as patients? Any guess? The relatives, like even small children. And why would that be inappropriate? First of the confidentiality part of it. You know, it could be a family member, but you don't want some confidential information. What other issues do you foresee? The confidentiality portion, like also remember in the Philippines we have the older people and then children that, children are not supposed to know some of these things about patients. So the class standards, what is class again? Culturally and linguistically appropriate services. Just for the meantime, you could just call it, these are guidelines put out by the Office of Minority Health at the Department of Health. Essentially, you see that the third bullet is your language access services. So if you get funding from the government, which most hospitals are, it is mandated that they have that language access assistance. If they don't have it, then they are in violation of a federal mandate. The other ones are all guidelines. It is mandated in some states in the United States, but in some it is not. So both the American Association of Colleges of Nursing and the National League for Nursing do have all these guidelines and toolkits to use. So if you it would be if you're interested in any of the materials, it probably would be easier for me to give you the link and then you could just access it. Or I may have, the PDF copies. I mean, as long as we don't mass produce it for other uses, it shouldn't be a problem. Some of these are just repetitions, and I already have talked about culture. And does anyone have a question about culture? What do you think the first objective or goal of the workshop today, and it's in front of you, is that awareness? Remember, before we could be aware or we could respect others' cultures, what do we need to do? We need to have that reflection of our own culture, to be able to be aware and to respect the other person's culture. I think it may be a good time for Mr. Sekar to, and then I will resume from, after him. He has about an hour on more diversity. Oh, I'm sorry. It's supposed to be introduced. I'm sorry. No, actually, Immaculata first introduce you. Yes,
our second speaker for this morning is a graduate of College of Rochelle in New York in 1985. He started his career in nursing on the same year as a critical care primary nurse. He had his hands on as an emergency nurse, operating room nurse, administrative nurse coordinator at 3 different hospitals in New York. His professional experience in home care enhanced his skills as case manager. He is a member of Transcultural Nursing Society, New York State Nurses Associations, Orange County Medical Reserve Corps. Presentations and publications are a part of his life as a professional nurse. He had presentations in LGBTQ issues affecting care, clinical issues related to geriatric care, pressure ulcer documentation, and the coding, to name a few. He received special awards and academic citations from Sigma Theta Tau International Society of Nursing and from the College of New Rochelle. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Mr. Drew Sager.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, first and foremost. And secondly, I should probably, as Dr. Sager mentioned, we've been married for 39 years, and Dr. Sager used to be my charge nurse, and she's still in charge. So, which, of course, she doesn't know. Now, what I'm presenting to you are issues affecting mental health in the, shall we say, nonconformist of sexual preferences. And this became very important to me in a very timely fashion, because unlike most, shall we say, graduate students, okay, I had not been prepared going into my final, my final semester, when I was going to have to develop a graduate project, and I am scrambling for a subject to work with. So, let me tell you now, if there's something you're passionate about, if there's something that is very important to you in your nursing careers and you're pursuing nursing, okay, work on it, okay, so that you're not as unprepared as I was when I went to my graduate project. So at that point, what had happened was, as I was scrambling or whatever, had been finishing my psychiatric postmasters in an outpatient clinic, and right about that time, we had a very high influx of people who were transgender in varying stages of transgender and were having severe psychiatric problems. Okay. Depression, suicidal ideation, you know, and you may or may not be aware, sometimes depression can actually cause psychotic features in people. They start to hear voices telling them denigrating things. In addition to which, many of them were having difficulty with family relationships. Okay. As we know, LGBTQ is an acronym, okay, for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and now the term queer has become acceptable again. Okay, there was a long period of time where you called somebody a queer. All right, you better be prepared to fight. Okay. Okay. That is no longer the case, at least in the U.S. They've adapted or adopted the terminology themselves. Okay, so as self-identification and as Dr. Sager mentioned, the melting pot, and otherwise claiming your identity, they have now begun to use that terminology to claim their identity, to proclaim their identity, which is very important. Okay, all right. Okay, these are some definitions for folks who may or may not be familiar with some of these. Okay, bisexual, of course, is a sexual orientation toward more than one gender. Okay, cisgender is a gender identity consistent with societal norms. Heterosexism is the institutionalization of behaviors that result from the assumption that all people are or should be heterosexual. Homophobia is, of course, a negative attitude or fear. Denigration of those who are sexually attracted to same-gender individuals. Lesbian and gay, I should have capitalized gay, my apologies, is a term describing those whose primary sexual orientations are members of the same sex. And transgender, of course, refers to people who are unhappy with the gender that they're born with, typically, and are in some degree or process of changing. Okay, next, thank you. Okay, this is a problem. Okay, the LGBT population. So from now on, rather than go through the entire acronym, I've seen basically non-conformist use. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to use that term as just being non-conformist. These are some interesting stats, okay? But we know that this population is particularly subject to harassment and persecution. 86 countries in the world continue to criminalize same-sex relationships. Okay, some of them institute very severe penalties, okay, prison terms of 10 to 20 years, okay, and in a few countries, I believe 5 are remaining,